What are some big mistakes you guys see people making right now? Like, you got a lot of thoughts on this, Brandon?
Yeah, I think one, most kids think that they're way, way stronger than they really are. They think that they're ready for gear when they're not. They think they're ready for supplementation when they're not. They're just basically, and I think that's a product of, without getting too far off the line, I think that's kids in general. You know, kids are wanting to be 10 years older than they are, and they're wanting to be 10 years stronger than they are. So they take a lot of shortcuts, they get a lot of bad habits. I think kids just need to slow down, you know, and really just train. The best way I think any kid can start out training is like a bodybuilder that wants to be strong. Just like the old school guys, Kaz, those guys. I mean, that's the way I train. That's the way. There were some seriously big, strong dudes back in my hometown, and I actually talked to one over the weekend, and we were just talking about numbers that these guys lifted, and that's the way they train. They just train to be strong bodybuilders. And, you know, I'm talking about guys that were squatting in the high 600s, low 700s with junky knee wraps and a thin bodybuilding belt, you know. Those numbers stick anywhere. And kids nowadays, they want to put the gear on so early just because it ups their numbers and it makes them feel stronger. And you're looking at these kids, and I hate going to meets and seeing a fat ass come in or seeing a kid that looks like he can't do anything. And then they come in and they put up a big number, which is impressive. But it's not real strength, you know, and that's going to sound like I'm bashing the gear, and I'm not. It's just I'm bashing the way that the mindset has gone to push kids into that so early. I think it's terrible.
I think that I have probably the exact same point that Brandon has. Not talking about people wanting to get into powerlifting gear too early. I have powerlifters, but nobody in gear here. But especially with just like our regular classes and people that want to, they want to skip all the beginning steps of just kind of building a base of, you know, if you want to do CrossFit, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. I'll teach you to do CrossFit, and I can get you want to compete in CrossFit, fine, that's whatever. But you're going to need to get yourself ready. I mean, people look at Nathan, who got third in that competition a couple weeks ago. You know, Nathan came into the gym with a ton of work capacity already. He was a sniper in the Marines. He carried a lot of heavy stuff. He ran around a lot. So he had the work capacity. And so then he's just spent all the time focusing on just doing things right, learning the movements correctly, getting good mobility, because that's one thing that the Marines do not do for you. They build the work capacity, but they do not do so much on the mobility. So, you know, working on that stuff and learning that you have to have all the basics of movement. I think that people kind of, they want to skip ahead all this stuff, and they're like, oh, well, how can I squat more? And if you tell them, well, you are barely getting to depth, so maybe if it was a little bit easier for you to squat, you'll just squat more that way. I think that everyone searches for magic exercises all the time, and reality, you're probably just trying to skip a bunch of steps. You know, if you every day send Chad an email and say, what's the best assistance exercise? My bench is stuck, my squat's stuck. You know, maybe look at yourself and say, oh, wait a second, have I skipped a bunch of steps? Do I really need another exercise right now? Or maybe should I just go back and make sure that I have done exercises I'm supposed to be doing correctly? Because I think that I've seen a lot of very, very simple programs until you're bench pressing 600 pounds raw and you're, you know, squatting 900 pounds or whatever. The chances are a very, very simple program will work for you.
Well, even that, to go back, my training has gotten much more simple, much more simple than it was even a year ago. I've dropped almost all bands, all chains. I'm basically straight weight, plates, and barbells, and my lifts have gone up drastically.
I made a huge mistake if you jumping into bands too early. I'll admit that. I was really young when I started powerlifting, and I kind of did that. I jumped in. And I've had to step myself back and do the things that I missed when I was younger now. I mean, my form was always pretty good, but especially guys now, and I'm gonna throw depth in there with form. Nobody really pounds form the way they should before they start going heavy. And I mean, I see guys that squat 4 inches high and call it a good gym lift. It's not a good gym lift because those last 2 inches of a squat, everything changes. You can squat way more 2 inches higher than you can at depth. Because as soon as you hit depth, your hips start coming in, your ass starts rounding under, everything goes crazy. So you really need to learn how to keep your technique spot on through the whole range of motion of every single lift, and then start pounding trying to get stronger really in it, and then maybe if you get to a certain level where you're not progressing good enough with straight weight reps, volume, changing stuff up, then start throwing in the bands, and then the chains. You understand what I'm saying?
I'm just saying.
Yeah.
I'll go along with both of what you guys are saying. Do the lifts.
Yeah.
Just do the lifts and do it well. I mean, there are people out there who have gotten ridiculously strong without any of the other gadgets that we've
Bill Kastner,
invented.
Ed Cohen,
Right.
Kevin Carey, they never use
Do the lifts. Like, don't, I mean, the thing about, like, people want to box squat, people want to do board work, and like you were saying, jump into gear real early. Just practice the lifts. The rest of that stuff, those are tools to be used in appropriate situations.
Exactly.
And there was a great example of that about 10 minutes before we started this video. Just hop on the rings up there, front lever. How many times you practice that?
Yeah.
Not any. I've got all kinds of people that all want to practice their muscle up and they want to practice all this stuff on the rings, but they can barely do any pull-ups. And it's like, oh, wait a second.
Right.
I got this guy that's really, really strong over here, and he's got a front lever, which is pretty difficult. If you've ever been hanging around in the rings, it's pretty tough to do. And he's got it. He's just like, hey, watch this. And everything's a lot easier when you're real strong.
I think the internet's been a great blessing, and it's also been a curse. You know, people look at Westside Barbell, and obviously they've had amazing success, but they don't realize from Westside for years had to use no chains, used no bands, did nothing but heavy box squats and real simple stuff, farmer carries, and got amazing results. And a lot of those guys have been lifting for a long time, and then the bands and the chains and all that kind of stuff. People want to jump, I get kids contact me on Facebook. Would you write me a circa max phase? My max squat is 225. Okay, well, why don't you look up my friend Jim Windler and do 531 for 5 years, and then maybe we'll take a look and see where you're at. And that's what people want. They want that, what's that with that Mag 10 stuff, dude? Like, can I take that? Like, what'd you eat for breakfast today? Oh, I didn't eat breakfast. Well, dude, like, start with that. Like, eat eggs and drink some milk and do whatever. And if you can't do a chin up, I mean, I don't care how big you are, you can probably do a chin up, can't you?
You get like 8 good ones.
Yeah, I mean, shit. I mean, come on. If he can do a chin up, you should be able to do a chin up too. But the fundamentals, nobody does the fundamentals anymore, not only in weightlifting, but in education. It's just our society doesn't want to do the work. They want to skip right to the instant gratification. And it's a problem. It's a serious problem. We're going to pay for it.
Well, and it's patience. How can I gain 30 pounds in an off season? Well, if you look at my weight gain, I started at about 175 pounds. I'm 325 now. It's 150 pounds over 10 years. It's a little over a pound a month.
How much is that beard?
The beard is about 35 pounds. But no, seriously, it's a pound. It's an excruciatingly slow pound a month by average.
Months and years, not days.
Exactly,
Right.
Months and years, not days and weeks. It's like, and you can't get kids to believe that and buy into it.
Well, we always look at the outliers. We see some guy that walks into DeFranco's gym, and God bless, I love Joe DeFranco, and some guy who's, like they had a guy at Kentucky years ago, who played for the Jets. I can't remember his name, but the dude never worked out, squatted 700 pounds the first time he walked in the gym.
Yeah.
Dwayne Robinson, I think his name was. Yeah.
Robertson, yeah.
And he's benched like 500 pounds for reps, never lifted before. We always look at these outliers, but if you want to be strong, you have to be consistent for years and years and years.
I've always thought that people shouldn't weigh themselves every day. I think if you're going to do a 10-week cycle, test before the 10-week cycle, test strength, and then after the 10-week cycle, test strength, and then judge by that. Don't try every 3 weeks to max out on every movement and think, well, I'm not really getting that much stronger. Then a program's not going to work in 2 weeks.
Right.
And to kind of go along with that, and I realize we're kind of getting a little off topic, but I think this is important. To go along with the whole months and years thing, like if you take a kid or somebody that's just starting out and they hear that, I can understand that's demoralizing to them. But the reason is because the focus is on the outcome. Their whole focus is on, I want to be this, Don't focus on that. I mean, it's good to have those goals. It's good to have the aspirations, but focus on what you're doing. Try to improve a little bit at a time, and take as much pride in the process as you do in the outcome, and become process oriented. And man, that makes the whole process enjoyable, and it makes the months and years it doesn't matter anymore because I'm having fun with what I'm doing.
I think that's a lot easier to do as a coach than as doing for yourself.
Yeah.
one thing that I always want to make sure is like, I always try to preach to people, take everything slow, learn how to do the basics, learn how to do the basics. But at the same time, you have to get people to show up. I think that me and Chad kind of talked last night about the difference between, Kelly's mobility stuff versus Mike's mobility stuff, and how I think that you can use them together. And I think that you do the same thing with the strength work, is you have to create small victories for people. If you're coaching, find some ways that you can create those small victories consistently, because as you start to, build momentum through all these small victories, well, then the person actually believes that whatever you're going to do is going to work. I mean, there's hundreds of programs out there, and basically if people just will believe it works, then you kind of just slowly make progress, and whatever discipline it's going to be, then you're going to set yourself up for success over the long run, rather than just...
Yeah, I'll use Dave Hoff as the perfect example. 24 years old, astronomical numbers. Probably, in my opinion, the best bench presser alive today. And it's like, how does he achieve this at 24 years old? He's been at Westside 9 years, and he's had somebody there every step of the way. And Dave will be the first person that if you called him and said, what do you do to achieve this? He lifts one meet behind his potential every single meet. So if he has a potential to be a 2550 at this meet, he's only going to attempt 2490 or 2500. So every meet, he's only at 97, 98%. So there's always room for progression, because Bob Coe, Louis Simmons, Joe Gesture, his main core of trainers have pulled him back, and it's never going that 110% at meets. You see guys do that all the time. They hit 110% at a meet, and it's like, what do I do now? Can I replicate that lift every day or for 10 weeks? Can I replicate that? And the other thing about Dave is just understanding the process, kind of like you said. He's around 25 guys that have benched 800 pounds or squatted over 1,000 pounds, whatever it is. And he had people saying, Dave, it's going to come. It's going to come. So it wasn't that long for Dave. It took him for 4 years to squat 1,000 pounds. But an 18-year-old squatting 1,000 pounds is humongous. And, eventually that led to 1,100 pounds, and it just recently led to 1,200 pounds. But people just see the 24 years old, and they don't see the 9 years, and they don't talk to the guy that tells you, hey, man, I could have done this at this meet, but this is the plan. This is the plan. This is the plan. And he never misses lifts. I lifted with a guy for 363 days, never saw him miss a top end lift, because he stopped when his body told him to. If he hit one that was like this, it was kind of a hard bench, and he was supposed to go one more, shut it down. He listened to his body better than anybody I've ever trained with.
Yeah, that's something, never missing lifts is something that Brandon and I have talked about. You're always going to be better off physically, mentally, everything. It goes back to when we were talking about recovery earlier, that, say you want to do a max triple, take 15 pounds off the bar than what you want to do, smash it for 3, walk away from it telling yourself I could have done 5, even if you're lying to yourself.
Right.
Tell yourself you could have done 5, instead of grinding the third one and walk away knowing that's the absolute most I had. It's bad psychologically and it's bad physically.
Leave one in the tank.
Yeah, absolutely. So you guys point too about the process, and I think so many of the problems we talked about are kind of symptoms of the internet, and I'm hesitant to say that because this video is going to be on. but we're so wise that we bless them with that extra perspective. Is that people lose sight of the process because they can go and read our training logs or whatever, be like, well, this is what Brandon Lilly does, and he's really strong, I'm going to do that. Well, you ain't Brandon Lilly, you're a 16-year-old kid who's been lifting weights for 6 months. Like, you got to go back in time. Like, it's tough for them to go back in time, figure out what you did to get there, because what works for me wouldn't have worked for me 8 years ago.
Exactly.
Or 12 years ago when I started training. So